Favorite part of the day, the part that that gets the brain flowing for me. So as you know 8:30 news, so be aware of that. That's a very key part in your analysis. We're gonna start off with the weekly, or my bad, the monthly today, because the monthly is starting to shift. So if you guys been here since the 1st of January, basically, we've been talking about how you are starting to close above this range here to the left, right? So if you take a close look at this, you're gonna notice that, my bad, you're gonna notice that you closed above this range here, right? Which means that you would have more range to continue driving up. Now this is the first time you're ever closing above the range, right? As you can see, looking left, there's been plenty of times in the past where like you came close here, came close here, came close here. At one given point, all of these candles were bullish, right? Like all these candles look like this at some given point, right? And it looked like I was gonna close or make on an all-time high, but I never did. But for the first time ever, you did actually close above, and that was in November. So last month's candle was just about whether or not we'll come down for a bond wick or come back into the range or whatever the case may be. But in this exact situation, you actually closed bullish above the range, right? Which means that this level is still being respected. So if that's your support, where is your next resistance? I would say it's gonna be around here at 2160, right? That's the top of the next range. So if we are closing above here, I would assume that you should be able to fill the range going up for the monthly, right? Obviously you have 20 days left, still a lot of time. This is the same breakdown we had on January 1st. Nothing has changed. All we mentioned was since January 1st that there needs to be a bond wick being created. And if you look left, the most logical level for price to create a bond wick at would be obviously the support level, right? Which is here, 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 and here, right? But you came close. You didn't tap it exactly, but you came close. So if this is where the bond wick is, then that's where the bond wick is, right? I think the weekly would really help you where the weekly bond wick is off the monthly and also the daily time frame. And I think yesterday we mentioned how, let me just get to that in a second here. So yesterday I mentioned how at any given point the weekly could flip bullish due to the fact that you didn't grab a top wick first, right? So we mentioned that if price was, so like this is the range we're in right now on the weekly. We're in this range right around here. So this is your resistance on price, and then this is your support, right? So this is the range we're currently sitting in. I mentioned to you guys that in order for price to continue driving down, and by driving down I don't just mean the range fill, I mean like if price were to be any situation to drive down and like push down past that level, it will need some liquidity because it needs to grab orders before it pushes down that steep, right? Since price never broke the highs this week and never came up to grab liquidity for a top wick, any given point during the weekly, it could literally just flip after, especially with the fact that you had no top wick, right? Because like the opening of the candle this week was just bearish. It just came straight down, and then it spent like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday making a new low, Thursday yesterday making a new low. Now we're starting to flip bullish. So if you're starting to flip bullish, there's really nowhere else to go looking left but the top of the range. So you would assume that, okay, well now the weekly should look like this. And this is exactly what we drew on the weekly yesterday. Like we drew this since Monday. We mentioned that, no bot, no top wick. Any given point, you could come down, tap this level, and start to flip bullish. And then we can start planning out buys and direction for price later on, right? So, like the direction didn't really come. Like who knows? Maybe the direction was the bearish push yesterday and the days prior. But any given point today with the news, you can easily just reverse that entire range and continue to drive and close bullish on a weekly. And if that were to happen, then next week's candle will give you a lot more direction, right, as to where we're gonna go next. So that's sort of why we wanted a top wick to start the week off, because if you were to have a top wick, then obviously you would have likely continued to drive further down. If this were to happen, there's a high chance we would drove further down, but that never happened. So this top wick area is something we're still looking forward to see happening, right? But the next focus now is not the top wick. The next focus now, with 8 hours and 54 minutes left in the daily, is you should be headed up towards the top of the range here, which is going to be the 2068 mark. All right, so that's kind of what I would like be looking at on the weekly right now with 8 hours left in the day. The daily will also play a huge impact as well. The thing about the daily today, I was looking at this last night during the Asian session, but the daily is a little tough because it never closed bullish above, right? So like, yes, the weekly looks like it's gonna flip bullish. It did come up to create a steeper wick, so that's a plus, that's a W. However, will it have enough direction in it today to continue driving up for the monthly flip? Because obviously if you make your way to the top of the range here, your top of the range on the weekly is going to be 2072, right? On the monthly, where is that? That's the daily flip, right? So if the daily flip, or my bad, the monthly flip, if the monthly flip's bullish, you would assume that you continue to drive further up. However, is this, looking at the daily, enough of liquidity for you to drive up to the top of the range? It could be. For all I know, like it definitely could be. Like there's been plenty of times where, well, but actually by plenty of times I mean just one time only. The last time price kind of reacted off the support, it did come up to the top of the range. Now the difference in this was you had a bullish direction already headed up towards the top of the range, right? Like you already printed structure here, whereas in this case you haven't printed structure here really. You're still at support, which you confirm support, I guess you can say, because you closed bullish, but that's not a confirming direction. I'll say if the hardest part about today is figuring out whether or not the day is going to flip bearish or if it's going to drive up. I think no matter where it goes today, if it were to continue driving up or flip bearish, there's going to be a pretty heavy trend in that direction until the market closed today. So the hardest part is really waiting for that to form and seeing how that will be printed. Keep in mind you have newsletter on, so that could sway things look, sway the way things look. But in terms of the daily, I would assume that like if you're able to create structure on a daily where, well, the daily can't really create structure at this point unless it just like flips bearish, but if it like creates structure on the 4-hour time frame, the one on its way up right now, you can kind of use that as a confirmation to confirm that, okay, you know what, maybe that was a 4-hour bottom wick, and maybe you can look to mirror the rest of the range going up, right? But things like this on a smaller time frame, things like this bottom wick area on price, the closure on price at 9, news, like that's gonna really determine the direction for price today. So you might not get direction today until 9:30, I'll say, because you do have news at 8:30, which doesn't mean you can't trade it, right? Just because you have no direction doesn't mean you can't trade it. It's just that once you have direction, it's gonna be a lot more clear, and you will see that happening at 9:30. Like you're gonna see it, and we're gonna come back to this time and be like, okay, chat, that's what I was talking about, right? So you will see that happening likely. But again, the hardest part today is just figuring out where it's gonna go next, right? The next step in today's direction. So obviously, you know, like you can kind of see looking at the daily, like yes, in the past there is a support here. In the past you did mirror price up towards the top of the range. However, was this enough of a bottom wick for us to rip up, right? From what I know, last time price was sort of bearish with the structure, right? Because this is bearish. This is a bearish structure. Looking at the last couple of candles, this is a bearish structure as well. You didn't really hold this level too well, and you end up coming down to fill the bottom of the range. The difference in this and this is that this had structure down below. This never had structure yet, right? On top of all of that, the daily also never closed above the range, right? So if you take a look at the daily, you're gonna see that this level right here is still being respected. You haven't closed above yet. You've been respecting the last 3 candles. 1, right? 1, 2, 3. So all those 3 candles have all been respecting this resistance. I would not be surprised today, right? And you have to be open to these things. If the daily just flips bearish, for all I know, I would not be surprised if this were to happen, right? So yes, our bias is today is like, I guess you can say, I mean, I wouldn't say we have a strong bias today, but we have ideas for whether for either direction today, if that makes sense. So like, let's say we continue to push up today, and we choose a bullish structure, or price decides to choose a bullish structure, we'll look for opportunities to take buys. However, if it's a bearish structure, we'll look for opportunities to take sells, right? But that all comes down to the 4-hour close, the news candles, and all the small time from candles that are being printed, because that will form the structure for you until 9:30. But this is the hardest part today, figuring out whether or not this is a rejection level, price to rip down, or figuring out whether or not this is enough for you to drop up, right? But right now, what I do understand is that we're in this range here on the daily. There's a resistance being formed right around there, and there's a support being formed right around here. So this is the range you're sitting in. You're sitting in the range of like 2046 to 2020. So that's not too bad of a range. Again, it's a 200 pip range, right? So it's definitely enough for you to grab your Tempest, whatever the case may be. But just be aware of the daily structure. It's very key to understand what's happening right here without having to look at this off of the daily. All right, chat. So just keep in mind out for that. Yeah, that's the daily. So how are we gonna figure out where it's gonna go, Don? So you've been saying all this, like, Don, like you don't know where it's gonna go in terms of direction, but you gotta figure out the direction on price, and that could be later on in the day. How will you figure out where that is? So what I'll do here is I'll probably drop down to like the 1 hour, probably. or maybe in the 4 here, and take a look at how things are looking, because you do have a 4-hour closure in about 48 minutes here. And I think the 4-hour candle comes down to how it closes. If there wasn't news, then obviously we can there's a higher chance we can have direction before 9, but with news in the way, that could sway the way things look. That could change the way the market structures, and that could change the bias for a day, for all I know. So after news, after the 4-hour close, 9:30 to 10, like that should be a pretty strong drive in whatever direction it decides to push into. But right now, what you understand is that this is a resistance here to the left. The good thing about this resistance though is that you do have structure on the 4. You didn't have too much structure on the daily, but you do have it on the 4 in terms of like, yeah, at one given point you kind of broke out of the range here, and then you kind of ripped back into the range. That was yesterday during the late NY, and then you started to push up towards the top of the range, right? So typically whenever price would print this, it will continue to drive past this resistance. Now 4-hour close, if it ends up closing bullish above the range like this, that should be enough for you to rip up, because looking left, like I don't think there's anywhere else to go but the top of the range here, and that top of the range takes you up towards 2068, and then you'll see something like this being printed off the daily if that were to happen, right? So closure above there at 9 a.m. should be ideal. Obviously if we get a trade before 9, then let me figure out where that would be, but okay, cool. So yeah, there's also no bottom wick here, which could not be an issue, to be honest, because you already printed a bottom wick down here, so we'll see what happens, obviously, but that may not be too much of an issue if you guys were thinking about that on the 1 hour. On the 4, yeah, so for the 30, the 1 to 15, I'll say probably put my resistance up here at the top of this range. Next resistance is where, probably around here. What is this? 2072, which is a 68 level candle in a way. Yeah, I mean, anything above like 55 would be great for buys. The issues you have news in 15, right? So I mean, yeah, news could print a bottom wick. I mean, I don't think it's an issue. I don't think it's too much of an issue. I think if you close above the range on the 4, I wouldn't wait for a bottom wick, is what I'm trying to say, right? But in terms of before the 4-hour close, yeah, I can still print one. Like for all I know, if news ends up like, let's say pushing down here, and you create a bottom wick on a news candle at like 8:30, and this is the first thing price prints, I'm taking a buy stop, right? If this is what happens, because if you come down for a bottom wick at 38, there's no given reason for you to flip bullish if you weren't to drive up, right? If you were to continue pushing down, then obviously you'd be pushing down with the 4-hour candle flip, you'd be pushing down with the daily candle because you have no bottom wick, right? But if you come all the way down the 4-hour candle, create a bottom wick at 38, and then you re-flip bullish, there was no reason as to why price would do that, aside from the fact that you're going to push up towards 55, right? So that news candle is going to be very key today, the way it prints between 8:30 and 8:40. And then after that, again, 9 a.m. you should have direction, right? Because obviously news can either do two things. It's going to push up or push down. If it pushes up, then you'll fill the top of the range. You'll likely close above in the 4-hour time frame, and you'll likely continue to push at 9. If you do end up flipping down on the daily news candle, then you will flip down with the daily time frame, and then you can look for sells on the way down. You know, maybe like, let's see, maybe like 28 might be pretty decent. I think that's the day flip, and then you have like more range below that area on the 5 and the 15. Probably anything below like maybe 2024 would be great for you to rip down towards like 2013, right? So you can go back to trading that range if you do end up coming down. But again, news is like in 30 minutes here or in 15, and there's no like confirmation as to, there's no guarantee of you going in any direction just yet, right? So wait for news to come out, wait to see how the market reacts to those numbers, and then hop on the wave that it prints. But yeah, we have plan ideas for the buys. As you can see, we just broke that down. We have plan ideas for the sells as well, right? So it comes down to just what prints first here. The question today is really just the daily bottom wick, or yeah, is that the daily bottom wick today, or is that not enough and you're gonna come back down, right? That's the hardest part of the day. But once that is settled down, then that's all figured out. You should have some decent direction on price, and you can probably look for positions, and it should be a pretty aggro day too with runners probably. So that's like the idea today, chat, of what we're looking for. What else can I say about that? I think, yeah, that's about it really. The weekly, we broke that down already. The weekly no top wick, you need a top wick at the top of the range. So if you do push up, it makes sense with the weekly as well. Going back to the weekly level, it sits right at 2072. It's just the daily today really. That's the only issue. But 9 a.m. you should see a confirmation and should be pretty straightforward afterwards. But potential trades, chat, are gonna be either at like 8:30 today, 8:30 to 1, 8:32, or it's gonna be at like, I'll say 9:15, 9:30 with the NYSE open, maybe 10.